As a Best Picture nominee, it's basically a $200 million perfume ad for "Isn't Brad Pitt cool?" And I mean that as both an insult and a compliment. So this is a bit of a strange episode for me, because this isn't the first time I've ranked F1 the movie. A few months ago, I covered it as a sports movie. And in that context, it crushed. It was thrilling, immersive, technically jaw-dropping, and exactly what you want from a modern racing film. So when this showed up as a Best Picture nominee, I was honestly surprised. Because while those two categories overlap sometimes, they're not the same thing. And this episode isn't about whether or not F1 works as a sports movie. We already answered that question. What I'm really interested in here is whether a movie that's this polished, this crowd-pleasing, and this intentionally myth-making can still hold up when you judge it by a completely different standard. Does excellence at spectacle translate to excellence in cinema? Or does it expose how narrow the movie's ambitions actually are? And that's the lens I watched it through this time. And with that in mind, welcome back to The Rank. I'm John. Just a quick heads up on format. I'll hit a handful of behind-the-scenes facts called the Potent Notables. Then I'll do a movie overview with spoilers, and I'll finish by ranking the movie across 10 categories. And today I'm going to continue ranking the 2025 Best Picture nominees with F1 the movie, starring Brad Pitt, with a story by Joseph Kosinski and Aaron Kruger, a screenplay by Aaron Kruger, and directed by Joseph Kosinski. F1 was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Sound, Best Visual Effects, Best Film Editing, and of course, Best Picture. But let's find out how this one stacks up, starting with the Potent Notables.
Potent Notables.
So as always, we start the Potent Notables with the box office. F1 the movie made $189.6 million domestically and $442.1 million internationally for a worldwide total of $631.7 million, all against a reported $200 million budget. So opening to $144 million worldwide, this film was actually considered Apple Studios' first true box office hit, and the first Apple-produced film to top the box office in its first weekend. It also marked the biggest global opening of Brad Pitt's career, surpassing World War Z from 2013, which opened with $112 million. And helping offset that massive budget was an estimated $40 million generated through corporate sponsorships and brand integration deals, which, given the world of Formula One, feels about as on-brand as it gets. A bidding war broke out among the major studios over the then untitled script once Brad Pitt was attached, with Warner Brothers and Apple Films ultimately winning out. And authenticity was clearly a priority from the start. Brad Pitt and Damson Idris formed all of their own driving, reaching speeds up to 180 miles per hour, which I'm sure was done purely out of budgetary concern, and definitely not just because they wanted to drive really fast. But getting the film made at all, though, required unprecedented cooperation from the sport itself. Securing permission from the FIA and all 10 Formula One teams took over a year of negotiations, allowing the production to film during live race weekends. Director Joseph Kosinski recalled showing Lewis Hamilton early racing footage, saying Hamilton simply smiled and responded, "It looks fast." Kosinski said his reaction was, "Oh, thank God. If Lewis says that, we're in a good place." And on the creative side, Carrie Condon's character, Kate McKenna, Apex GP's first female technical director, was inspired by real-life Formula One strategy engineer Bernie Collins, a former F1 engineer from Northern Ireland. And finally, a behind-the-scenes note that caught a lot of attention. Simone Ashley completed the full promotional tour for the film, only to discover just a week prior to release that her storyline had been entirely cut. And while she appears briefly in the film, she has no line. And Joseph Kosinski said that the cuts were part of a difficult editing process, saying it happens on every film. There were 2 or 3 storylines that ultimately didn't make it in the final cut. But those are all the Potent Notables. Let's go to the movie overview. So we're introduced to this movie as if in a dream. We've got waves crashing on a beach, interspersed with the hum of engines and speeding cars. And wouldn't you know it, it's because we're in Sonny's dream. Sonny Hayes is the protagonist of this 2.5-hour movie. And I'm highlighting that it was 2.5 hours because that felt a little indulgent. And also, for those of you who've been following for a while, you know that I already ranked this movie, but I ranked it as a sports movie, where it did really well. It made supreme cinema with the second highest tier. And this movie is a perfect example of why I like to rank movies by genre, Because while it was a really fun sports movie, a Best Picture nominee it probably should not be. The entire scope of this movie is basically to show what a movie star Brad Pitt is, and how cool F1 is. And from that vantage point, it succeeds. Brad Pitt is going to start off stoic, and he's going to end up stoic and sage with a shroud of mystery, which feels very classic movie star to me. He's presented in a way that we are immediately drawn to the idea that he doesn't care about accolades, that he's just a man who lives his life and keeps to himself. The best kind of man there is. He's going to show up to a race that we find out he's actually in the middle of, where the driver who took his spot for a leg of the race has lost a lot of ground. The crew chief is going to tell Sonny to take it easy and hold position through the night, and they'll hope for some luck in the morning. Now, we've only seen Sonny for a little bit here, but we all know that his manliness cannot concede to just holding position. We know he's going to push, and that's exactly what he does. And he doesn't just push, he gets them back into first place. Meanwhile, the whole time he's driving, the crew chief is like, "Now that's a driver," which of course is really meant to be read as, "Now that's a man." And when Sonny hands over the reins to the next driver, he says to him, "Lose that lead and I'll kill you." So he's competitive, just another sign of his manliness. And his team wins, but he's on to the next stop already. The crew chief tries to get him to hold the trophy, but Sonny refuses, saying it's bad luck. Then he tries to get him to stay on, but Sonny refuses that as well. A deal's a deal. So the crew chief is like, "One and done? What kind of way is that to race? You spend your whole life starting over, man." And these lines, spoken by the crew chief, are the exposition that we need to understand Sonny Hayes. And as Sonny is headed to his next stop, which seems to be a sand buggy race in Baja, he's stopped at a laundromat when a very rich-looking Javier Bardem stops at the same laundromat in his shiny Porsche. Now, the interactions and dialogue with the crew chief felt very sports movie cliche, and this meeting between Ruben, who's played by Javier Bardem, and Sonny feels just as cliche, as the two stoic men's men don't just greet each other, they pretend not to know each other, so that the audience can get a little more exposition. Ruben owns Apex GP, which is a new Formula One team, and he's had a shit go of it. What does he need Sonny for? He wants to bring him on as a driver, because he just lost a driver and all he has left is a rookie. On top of that, he's in the hole $350 million, and his team hasn't ever won a race. Actually, they haven't even scored a point, which in Formula One means that nobody on his team has ever made it into the top 10 of any race in 3 years, well, 2.5 years. And if they don't win a race in the first 3 years of his ownership, the board can force him to sell the team. There are 9 races left. So there's your stakes. Now we're gonna get some more exposition for Sonny as well. He's apparently a gambling junkie who lives in a van. Either way, Sonny, despite it being an opportunity for him to say that he really did race against the best, keeps saying no thanks. But we're gonna leave Sonny here and head over to Apex GP. This is where we meet the rookie driver Joshua Pearce. He's racing around the track and we're seeing all this crazy tech and testing information they have for these cars. They're establishing how much money goes into these cars and teams, which is clearly a lot. We're also establishing that the tech team needs Josh to communicate better about what's going on with the car, so that they can make it better. And we're actually getting a lot about Josh in this scene. He's a little insecure, he's got a chip on his shoulder, and he's got a manager that maybe isn't acting in his best interests. Enter Sonny. He's decided to give it a shot. I mean, surprising, right? Of course, everyone's talking about how old he is, and that he's too old to be doing this. And right away we can see friction between him and Josh. When Josh asks him when the last time he won a race was, and Sonny says, "Yesterday, Daytona." Then Josh sort of haughtily chuckles and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I meant Formula One." So then Sonny mock chuckles and responds, "Oh, I'm sorry, then same as you." Casper, the crew chief, is not super thrilled with this, and tells Ruben that it's a little late in the game to be auditioning a driver. And then we get another cliche sports moment when Ruben says, "I think you misunderstood. We're not auditioning him, he's auditioning us." And as Sonny is testing the car, he ends up crashing it. And that's sort of the story of this movie. Sonny seems like a fuck up, but he just keeps getting better and better. And it just keeps going in that vein. And there continues to be friction between him and Josh, but Sonny just never gives in. As a matter of fact, they crash each other in their first race while fighting for second to last place. And Sonny says to the crew chief, "Don't ever tell me to give up position." But in the next scene, we find out it's really a mentor's lesson to Josh. They need to learn that no one gets past us without a fight. No one. Another thing that becomes clear early on is that Sonny has a crush on the technical director, Kate McKenna, an Irish lass. And you just know that eventually he's gonna get her despite Ruben not wanting him to. I mean, just everything about this movie is a paint-by-numbers sports movie. We even get a training montage, and we see that Josh is a very digital trainer and Sonny is a very analog trainer, as you might expect with a 30-year age difference. And on top of that, we're going to continue to see Sonny be one step ahead of everyone. Literally every single thing he says in this movie ends up being correct, no matter how it appears at first to everyone else. Everyone thinks he's fucking up, but he's always helping Joshua gain position. And Josh is becoming a better driver because of him, and he's starting to buy in as well. That is, right up until the fateful day. They had their first win within their grasp, as Sonny was sacrificing to make sure that Josh got the victory. Sonny told him to wait, but the impatient youngin' decides to try to pass the guy earlier than when Sonny said to do it, and ends up in a terrible accident. So Josh, he ends up getting bad burns on his hands, and having to be out for 3 races because of it. And instead of acknowledging that he went too early, he lets his mom and his manager get in his head. But what happens while Josh is out is that Sonny keeps moving up and up in the rankings here, going from 9th place to 7th, then to 5th, and the stands are filled with people holding up big cardboard Sonny heads. Everyone loves him, which means that young Josh is getting jealous. So when he comes back to the team, he's ready to burn it all down. And in their third to last race in Las Vegas, they end up crashing, just like they did in their first race together. But Kate McKenna, the love interest, she's gonna fix everything by having them play poker with her. And we get even more signs of Sonny's greatness and manliness when he throws the poker game to give Joshua what he needs, that #1 driver mantle, while Sonny gets the girl. But we've got one more wrench here. Formula One has received some documents anonymously that the Apex GP team had illegal parts on their car, which means they have to go back to the old cars that they called a shitbox. Now, this is the only time when Sonny does something wrong, but the movie lets us know it's justified. He drives angry. We even get Ruben telling us he's driving angry, just in case the dummies in the audience didn't get it. And what does driving angry mean? He gets into an accident. That's it. Now it's his turn to be in the hospital, and this is where we find out that the accident that ended his career 30 years ago really should have kept him out of a car to this point, because another injury could paralyze or kill him. And this is something Ruben just cannot do. He doesn't want to have Sonny's death on his conscience. So Sonny's out. Josh is going to have to take over leadership of the team. But wait, remember the board that wanted to sell the team? Well, earlier in the movie, we were introduced to one of the board members named Peter Banning. Now, Peter was presented as the only guy on the board who actually wanted to keep the team. Oh, but this movie is a trickster. He actually wanted the sale. The only reason they approved of the Sonny Hayes hire was because they thought he would help them lose. But now he likes Sonny's charisma so much that he wants to bring him on the team after the sale. And then Sonny figures out that Peter, this totally not generically cliche and slimy businessman, forged the documents that got the investigation started against Apex GP. So we go on to the final race, and it's in Abu Dhabi. Sonny's not there, and there's no way he'll show up. It's just Josh. And he's doing what Sonny was doing, getting everyone to run together. You know, the analog fitness. But when they finish their run, who do they see walking down the track? Why, it's Sonny Hayes! He comes back totally unexpectedly. He's got a liability waiver, which doesn't really convince Ruben to let him drive. But when Sonny says to him, hey, if the last thing I do is drive that car, I will take that life, man, 1,000 times. And this is the line that convinces Ruben that he's gotta let him do it. And the movie's gonna really lean hard into the whole Sonny may die at any moment thing by showing him getting blurred vision and shit. Don't worry, he doesn't. He doesn't die. The only real question for this movie is, will Sonny help Josh win, or will Sonny win? Literally everything else that has happened has been telegraphed by a mile. And as we get to the end of the race, it looks like neither of them will win. But that crafty veteran Sonny, he comes up with a miracle by having another accident. There are 3 laps left, and for whatever reason, they have an extra set of tires to use because they did poorly in qualifying. Ruben's gonna say, sometimes when you lose, you win, to Josh's mom, and she's gonna say, that don't make no sense. And then Ruben's gonna say, it's a Sonny thing. So we just keep going with the mythologizing of old Sonny. So these 3 laps to go, and it looks like Josh is gonna win. But him and the second place car get into an accident, and Sonny wins. And Josh says to him, hey, I'm going to win millions of races. I figured I might as well let you have one of them. And of course, Sonny's not going to touch the trophy and he's going to walk away from the limelight. Not just the limelight, but also Kate, who he's just betted. He's going to say, you know, in the manly fashion, I've gots to get going, little lady. You'll still think of me with love just as I will you, right? It's fine that I'm up and leaving because it's what I have to do. And you know this because everyone has a deep understanding of an itinerant, manly man. And of course, she's like, I could never tame a man like you, and I wouldn't dare to try. So we end the movie with him driving in Baja, like he was planning on doing earlier in the movie. I guess the race was like a really long time away, so it's perfectly legit that he did 9 races in Formula One in a bunch of different countries and was still able to make this one. But we still have one more stoic manly man moment. When he gets there, they tell him, we can't pay you much. And he says, it's not about the money. So they say, what is it about? Damn, just so deep. And that's the whole movie. Now, I just want to remind people that I did rank this movie as a sports movie previously, and it did really well. But being a good sports movie may not translate into being a good Oscar nominee for Best Picture. But hey, let's find out. Let's go to the rank.
A rank.
So the rank is where I rank the movie based on 10 categories. Story, acting, originality, film coherence, cinematography, score/soundtrack/sound, script structure and dialogue, character relatability, production value, and my rank. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. And if you're really enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. So the story is a generic, grizzled veteran sports story who earns one more chance to prove his worth, all the while teaching a rookie how to be a better player. I mean, they basically took the script of Bull Durham and were like, let's make him actually not want to go and not keep the girl. Then it's a completely different movie. That being said, I like that story, so I gave it a 7.5. So that brings us to acting, and the acting is fine, but the movie is so cheesy. There are so many lines that are just like roll your eyes cheesy. And again, it's fine if you're expecting to be entertained by a car racing movie, but it's not great when you're expecting something that is up for the best movie of the year. But it really wasn't bad acting, so I don't want to tank it. I gave it a 7.5. And that brings us to originality. Come on, this isn't original. Its originality exists in the way that they filmed the racing, which genuinely feels amazing. But other than that, it's pretty generic. I gave it a 5. And that brings us to film coherence. And I don't think this needed to be this long, especially if you're going to telegraph every twist you send, except for the ending, but that was really just an either-or ending. Still though, it's paint by numbers, which makes it coherent. So I knocked it a little bit for length, but ultimately I ended up giving it an 8.75 because it's very coherent. So that brings us to cinematography. And this to me is by far the best part of the movie. I mean, they basically invented new cameras to film this. It's incredibly well done from an inside the car action standpoint. Other than that though, there's nothing really that stands out. However, that part really does stand out. I gave it a 9.25. So that brings us to score/soundtrack/sound. The soundtrack is a lot of fun. The score is kind of, well, generic. It hits every beat you'd expect, which isn't a bad thing, but it doesn't make it a standout. So I gave it an 8. So next up is script structure and dialogue. Dialogue is kind of pathetic in this. Most of the time it's just fun, but there are so many moments of just eye-rolling dialogue where they're mythologizing Sonny. I gave it a 6. That brings us to character relatability. They're all decently relatable. Ruben wants to save his team. Sonny is stoic but wants to help. Josh is a little petulant and has a nice arc. Nobody is drawing great empathy here, and Sonny is kind of invulnerable. I gave it a 7. So that brings us to production value. They spent $200 million on this, and it shows. The sets and designs are gorgeous, and it feels like we're spending time on tour with an F1 team. It really doesn't get much better than this with production value. I gave it a 10. So that brings us to my rank. Now, I ragged on this movie a lot throughout the overview and in the rankings, but I genuinely enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was, which, as I've repeated ad nauseum at this point, is a sports movie. It doesn't belong on this list. So if I'm rating as a potential best movie of the year, I'm giving it a 6.75 because it just isn't. But there's no denying it's fun. So if you want to watch it because you're looking for a fun ride, go for it. But if you see it on the best picture list and you think, wow, I'll have to give this a try, lower your expectations. So altogether, that puts F1 at a 75.75, which makes it an I'd watch it again. This puts it behind the first 4 nominees of 2025 that I've ranked. In order, One Battle After Another, Sentimental Value, Begonia, and Sinners. As for all time, this puts F1 the movie below Miracle on 34th Street, and just above Witness for the Prosecution and The Racket. And if you're ranking along with me, drop your score in the comments. But thanks for listening and or watching. Check out my other Best Picture nominee episodes, or any of my other movie or sitcom ranking episodes on this channel. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. For up-to-date rankings, you can check out my website at therankedpodcast.com, where you can also email me at john@therankedpodcast.com. And if you want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankedpodcast. But all right, it's time for me to be rad and head for the pit.
Oh, brother.
As far as all time, this puts F1 the musical.
So once when she isn't looking, get a squeeze back, that's fancy cooking.